Hello, my name is Rob Simpson and welcome to Directors Uncut. If this is your first episode, we put filmmakers from all genres and all corners of the globe onto a huge list that covers everything from South American surrealists to French extremists and everything in between. Then we turn it into a lottery of directors by using a random number generator to pick a name out of the hat. Whatever number comes out, myself and some guest hosts discuss them and their work through 2 films. This week I have been joined by from GHOULS magazine, Ariel.
Hello.
And James from, well, you're both from Motion Picture Movie Club, are you not?
Yes.
Yes. Hello there.
So how are you both this afternoon stroke evening?
Good. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you both.
Yeah, I'm doing quite well. This is a treat, so looking forward to this.
Yes, the director that came out of the hat last time was Jackie Chan. Now, there's a funny question here, because usually at this point of the podcast they say, so, where did you first hear of Jackie Chan? And that's just such a weird question to ask somebody, because he's Jackie Chan. Surely he's just sort of omnipresent, that you hear about him, you know, when you're like under 10, like with Spider-Man and all these other things, it just, you know about him instantly, if you see what I mean. Is it true for you too? It was for me anyway. It feels like I've always known about Jackie Chan.
Yeah. I feel like I've known a little bit about him for a long time. Like, I think probably my first exposure to him was in Rush Hour, which is not one of the movies we're discussing today. But I feel like I was a little bit late to the party on just how big his catalog is. And it's really been over just the last couple of years that I've discovered how much I enjoy Hong Kong action films, and Jackie Chan in particular. I've always been a big fan of stunt work, and so of course there's plenty of that to enjoy when you're watching Jackie Chan. So I'm just now really getting all the way into, you know, all of his works, and just find that I really enjoy it, and everything I watch is, you know, just as good as the last thing. So a little bit of exposure to him early on, but a lot more lately.
Kind of contrary to my experience, and that's cool.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
We don't all have the same path. I like that, yeah.
My path is also different because while I do remember sitting down with my family and watching on BBC and that's the kind of Shanghai Noon and the Rush Hours, but I definitely remember my parents sitting down and watching on like Channel 5. They showed the Jackie Chan action films, the older ones like Police Story came up and Rumble in the Bronx, and it was quite interesting that I don't really register the films, but I have little memories of, say, Jackie Chan attacking someone with a car antenna, or or the final scene of Police Story, or just a lot of the more physical stuff he did. And then in between all that was the animated show Jackie Chan Adventures, which popped up when I was a kid, and I distinctly remember, oh, it's Jackie Chan. Ooh, he's fighting dragons and demons. Oh, this is so cool. And it's just very interesting, the different paths his career taken and the different ways we all have approached it and were introduced to it.
It was a funny era, that, the Jackie Chan Adventures, because it was around the time, sort of mid-90s, when America or Hollywood got really interested in that trio. Because there was that TV show, which Samo did as well, short-lived, Martial Law, I think it was called, if I remember correctly. Which, if I got my stories correct, he basically didn't want to tone himself down for Hollywood audiences. He wanted to go full Samo, and there was a conflict of personalities there. There's 2 faces to Jackie Chan. There's the face which the action hardcore fan will know about, going back to when he was a stuntman in Enter the Dragon, I think, and got his backside kicked by Bruce Lee. And there's the people who know him for The Tuxedo, which is a horrible way to get exposure to Jackie Chan, really. So we're representing both sides of his work through the picks that we've made in this episode. On the Hong Kong end of his spectrum, and his work with Golden Harvest is not to front face it too much, but legitimate action masterpiece, Police Story. And on the other side is his less masterpiece of a movie, Who Am I? which I believe is an Australian co-production shot in South Africa and Amsterdam. So, which one of those do you want to tackle first? Do you want to tackle the legit masterpiece, or do you want to build up to that with Who Am I?
So are you saying, should we have our dessert first, or should we go for the fruit?
Yeah, essentially. Broccoli or really nice dessert. You're the guests, it's your choice.
Ariel, how about we go for Who Am I first?
I like that idea. I really like that idea. We can have the broccoli first.
I've lost all my memory.
One of them is still alive.
He's lost his memory. What harm can he do us?
I want every one of them liquidated.
Everybody wants to know who you are.
So do I.
Now, the only way he can do any good is if he remembers just how bad he can be.
You want to know who I am? I want to know who I am. Someone's after me.
You don't know who to trust.
Who are you? Someone bring my memory back!
Don't trust anyone.
Almost an effectively meaningless task when it comes to a Jackie Chan movie, but Synopsis. Who wants to take a tackle at Who Am I Synopsis? It's a funny one, admittedly.
I can give it a try.
Please do, yeah.
Yeah, it's a tricky one to negotiate because it's just stuff and then fighting. So, yeah.
So Who Am I is a 1998 story where Jackie Chan wakes up in what's described as an African tribe to find he has horrible bruises, broken legs, and amnesia. He believes that his name is Who Am I because that's the response he's given. And in the midst of that, he has to find out what circumstances led him to lose his amnesia, what the people who are hunting him want, and what this all have to do with some MacGuffin mineral which gets CGI bumps before it explodes.
Yeah, there's a little sequence before that where I don't know what he's supposed to be. He's some sort of military unit, and he's doing something in the jungle, and that escalates. There's a double crossing, and then just casually he's thrown out the side of a helicopter and manages to survive, which is a thing, I guess. Given the bumps he's taken, I guess it's on brand for him. So Ariel, what do you think? What do you think of this one? I've kind of front-loaded my opinion, but doesn't mean it's yours too.
Well, it is, though. So I hadn't watched this movie until I was watching it to prepare for this discussion. And I, mostly just recently have watched Police Story and Drunken Master and getting into those. And so I was like, okay, great. Here comes another one. And I watched Who Am I? And I was like, what is this that I'm watching? It's not that it's terrible. I don't want to give that impression. But there's so much plot that is just unnecessary for what I want to do, which is get from set piece to set piece with stunts. When we get into Police Story, that's much more straightforward. And James, I like how you said this MacGuffin mineral, because the whole time I was kind of waiting for something more to happen with that, and it doesn't really, because it is just MacGuffin-y. Who Am I doesn't have... It almost just misses being melodramatic enough to enjoy. It's a little... It's dramatic, but it doesn't feel as fun because it keeps coming back to all these dark plot points that I didn't really need. So there's some wonderful stunts.
Yeah.
There's a lot to enjoy. I like the two women that Jackie Chan is interacting with, Yuki and Christine, but not my favorite one, I will say that.
That's a very diplomatically phrased way to tackle this one.
What I describe Who Am I is reverse engineered filmmaking, because it feels like Jackie Chan had all the ideas of what stunts he wanted to do, and boy, it shows because the stunts are really good. But then he builds around this lackluster story of this spy thriller, which feels like it's filling in the blanks because it can't just be a film of stunt work and Jackie Chan kicking people until the film ends. But I'll be honest, that stuff didn't really get me. The stunts really kept me engaged and interested because they are so darn good. And I think on the basis of them, I enjoyed this film, but there's better examples of this kind of thing, but it's not a bad example, to be fair.
Yeah, I just giggled there because thinking about the stunts, there's moments. We'll spoil this. I think it's not fun in talking about movies if we don't, get into the nitty gritty of them. But there's a bit at the end of this where he kicks the two bad guys, or he engages with the two instigators behind this whole plot, and it's just hilarious example of obvious stuntman switch. I don't know if you picked that up.
Yes. Yes.
You made me giggle quite a lot.
Yes. I'm always looking for that, not because I want to expose the seams in a movie, but because I love stunt work so much, and I think it doesn't get enough attention, but I enjoy looking for it. And so I think I did notice the part that you're mentioning. Yeah,
it wasn't well hidden, really.
I noticed one as well.
Oh, okay. There's another one beyond those two?
Yeah, at the end when... Okay, full spoilers. When Agent Morgan is being arrested at the end, and I forget the character's name, the CIA agent comes and beats him down, Agent Morgan has suddenly grown a lot more hair and it's a lot more darker. So either those kicks have hair rejuvenative abilities, or stunt switcheroo has happened.
Yeah, because it's such a weird turnaround, isn't it? I mean, you said there you feel like it's sort of reversed engineering movie. That's kind of what Jackie Chan does. And the legend is that Jackie Chan had two famous stunt scenes in mind for Police Story. I know we're not talking about it yet, but he had the two sort of bookends, the amazing intro and the big fight at the end. And he asked, what is it, his name? Edward Tang, who's in who co-wrote 11 of his 12 productions, sort of filled in the gaps. This one, I think it could have done with a little bit of a scriptwriter, really, because it's sort of a very similar to his... I'll full disclosure here. When he became the biggest actor in the world, sort of late 80s, and he stopped doing sort of the gritty action movies, and he started doing the My Lucky Stars, which is basically just knocking about and doing silly... Well, basically Jackie Chan becomes a bit of a lech in his roles. Effectively, it puts the impetus on the comedy, and there's the beginning bit with the African tribe. It's not dated the film particularly well, has it? It's horrible, in fact. I'd go as far as to say.
Yes. And I know 1998 was longer ago than I want to admit personally, but it still felt a little bit too recent to have that, and maybe that's just me being naive, but that interpretation of what it might be like to observe or be a part of a tribe somewhere in the world that is different than your own, that was jarring to me. I was like, whoa, this isn't what I expected in this movie. And thankfully, we don't spend a ton of time there. I was worried we were going to spend a lot of time in that, and we don't. But that was surprising to me.
Yeah, it felt like a condensed version of Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls.
Yeah. I mean, he has a history of doing that. I think there was a degree of that in his westerns too. That's sort of I don't want to phrase it like this, but sort of laughing at the foreigner. Would you say that's fair, or am I sort of blowing it out of proportion?
Not sure.
Because there weren't subtle movies in that regard. They're mocking his language in that movie, and in this one, it's sort of mocking the otherness of African tribes. And a section where it sort of segues out of that, where he effectively meets Yuki, I think it is, who's a rally car driver, and he's got his mouth full of stuff, and it's just, that scene's just not funny, Jackie Chan. I'm really sorry. It's like the whole first 20 minutes, I think you could happily get rid of in this.
It feels like it's going for the easy option, which can be punching down regardless.
Yeah, but it's kind of over and done with quite swiftly, I think. Then it moves on to the meat of the scenario, really, which is that who is Jackie Chan? He moves from place to place. He's in South Africa, then he goes to Rotterdam, and then he has a big fight and tries to escape and jumps off the side of a building. Just a normal, normal
just
day.
Just a Jackie Chan day.
Yeah. Am I overanalyzing this? Is this just a horribly unfunny movie, or am I just maybe reading it in the wrong mood, maybe?
It's hard to know. I feel like maybe I'm going too easy on it just because I'm not as familiar with this era of Jackie Chan's work. But especially the part with the tribe is just not needed at all, and it seemed like it was probably a lot of work to make, and so you wonder what it's doing there. And I agree with you that the stuff that happens in between the amazing stunts just isn't as good as some of his other movies. So I don't think you're way off or anything like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's with something like Police Story, as you said, they pretty much reverse engineered it because they had the bookending stunts in mind, but it's less noticeable. Whereas something like this, it feels more noticeable because what's in the middle doesn't really engage you as much. And yeah, it doesn't really help that it opens on such a dated sequence. And there's just more seamless ways that this could have all come together, really.
Yeah. But after that, I think it's again, I'm coming from the perspective of seeing pretty much all of his movies, give or take the absolute, dregs, like the bottom rung of his career, which I think he'd like to forget. So you two talked about the great action. So is there any particular moments that really stole the show for you?
I mean, the skyscraper in the room that we have to address is him running down the side of a building. It looks amazing. It is amazing. I just rewound and watched that a couple of times. It's just wild.
I'm surprised the movie itself doesn't do it because his movies have a habit of replaying stunts.
Yes.
Especially when he nearly dies from them.
Yep.
And I'd assume he'd nearly die from that, honestly. James?
I quite liked the car stunts which occurred.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when that sudden and seamless parking, which is just, I could drive for 1,000 years and never do anything that good. Ow! And
yeah, honestly, this is probably a controversial opinion, but I think that is the best scene in this movie. Just that chase sequence.
Great. That is great.
Because there's a few movies he's done in the past. I can't remember the name of it, but he did a largely action-based movie before, and it's mostly car driving. It was around this era. The name escapes me because it's become quite obscure over the years. But yeah, absolutely great stuff. He always does some mad things with cars throughout his career.
Now I want to find out what movie you're referring to and watch it, because I want more of those car stunts in my life.
It was like I think he was a race car driver. Yeah,
I'll have to look it up.
Yeah, it's when you see so many Jackie Chan movies, it's kind of hard to distinguish them. And the one that stands out, I can't remember what that was. It was so long ago. Yeah, do you think, how would I word this? The stakes are kind of weird, aren't they, really? Because the convoluted plot, you don't know what they're really building up to. Why are they fighting? It's the story kind of a crutch that the action needs for you to feel invested. And it's weird. It's a weird sort of hump to get over on this one.
It does feel quite vague about what's in between, particularly this mineral, which this MacGuffin is apparently a meteorite, according to the synopsis on Letterboxd. But did anyone pick up on that? Because I think I missed something.
They mention it.
No.
That's as far as they take it. They mention the fact that it's a mineral. What is the description? That can basically revolutionise all industries with some very hasty science scenes. And then later towards the end, but we can turn machine guns into rocket launchers. And it's, okay, that's a leap, I guess.
I had to laugh at the end of the movie when he has this disc with, it must be the information about how to use the meteorite. I'm not clear on exactly what's on the disc, but it has to do with using the mineral. And instead of handing it over, he says, "My father told me to respect nature." And then he litters by throwing the disc into the water, into the river. And I was like, is that meant to be a joke? I don't, because obviously he's talking about respecting nature and not going after this mineral and revolutionizing industry, etc. But he drops this line about respecting nature and then litters. And I just had to laugh out loud by myself on my couch.
There's like a disc and a plastic sleeve and plastic. If you're at that bottom of the river for thousands of years after he's done that. Well done, Jackie Chan. Mixed messaging. It's just the plot. I mean, usually you care if Jackie Chan wins or not, but it just doesn't set up that much of a reason, really. He's just fighting because, let's fight.
That's a good point.
Essentially.
But how does it rank as a fight, though? I mean, it all builds around him beating the living hell out of people. There's a great bit where he kicks the weird little bit of casting where the person with the money is effectively a sort of New York Italian gangster stereotype, which is a choice, I guess. As far as running sort of multi-billion-dollar operations, it's a choice for a character, I guess. And then it's just him running away and has a fight with these, I think it's a German kickboxer and a Japanese boxer on the roof.
Mm-hmm.
So what did you think of that bit?
Well, that fight's enjoyable. I mean, it's well done. I would watch it just as much as any other Jackie Chan fight.
Yeah, Jackie Chan excels in these fights and stunts, and I think he does that quite well here. One little bit I liked is when that one henchman is getting pretty much getting beaten with his tie and with his jacket, and the other guy just takes off his tie and takes off his jacket, preparing to not fall down the same things as his partner is.
Yeah. He takes a kicking though, doesn't he, Jackie Chan?
Oh, yes.
And that's,
yes.
The other two take much less of a kicking than he does, but apparently that's too much for him. But he's just a sponge for this stuff, I guess.
I also really enjoyed the wooden shoe fight.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was fun. That I wasn't expecting it. I've not seen anything like it before. I doubt I'll see anything like it elsewhere. That was really fun. That was a way to go, okay, what can we do with this fight scene to make it different than the others?
It genuinely looked painful as well.
Yeah, it did.
Kicked in the face with clogs. It's also that scene is the bit where, like I said earlier, you usually have this one stunt where the plate back over and over. That is where that happens, isn't it?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I think they drop a piano and there's like a pane of glass. And yeah, when you do these things for real, I guess it would happen.
It stresses me out so much thinking about that piano smashing to pieces, though. Like, I'm just like, no, somebody stop it. But they got to do it.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of these things. It was in 1998, so he's past like the horrible horror age of his career. It kind of, I don't know whether I can say this about a movie in which he jumps off the side of a building, but the stunts kind of feel tame. I don't know. Because you look at sort of Armour of God, he nearly dies. Like, literally, the credits are that horrible when he falls off a giant wall tree and bangs his head off a rock. Just, I think he's got like a metal plate in his head off that. But in this,
yikes!
Yeah, it's like the end credits as well. Usually, it's got all the things going wrong, and nothing really went wrong. It's very safe for a Jackie Chan movie.
In a way, that's a good precursor for his transition over to American features, because the kind of stuff he was doing before this, especially we're going to talk about in what he did in Police Story, he still does some of his stunts in the like Rush Hour, the Tuxedo, but he's definitely in the tame part of his career probably because Hollywood blockbusters just said, no, you can't do this, otherwise we won't get insurance or anything. There's no way they would fund him doing some of the stuff he did beforehand.
That is actually the reason as well. Nobody can insure him. You know, I think he's got to do all of his madness in Hong Kong because just nowhere else would finance it. And he's still doing it. I think Chinese Zodiac, which he did a few years ago, he went down the side of a mountain, sort of a precarious mountainside road on effectively a skateboard. Which,
oh man,
geez.
I need to see that. I haven't seen that.
Who'd be, I think, in his late 50s about then. It's calm down, Jackie. Come on, calm down.
Calm down. Might as well do it while he can, I guess. What else is he going to do?
Yeah, well, I don't think he'd be, one of the old stereotypes in the old Shaw Brothers movie where the lonely master just teaching new generations. He wants to go out in a ball of flames.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
It's like the Johnny Knoxville thing of, I've been doing this since I was younger, but what else am I going to do?
Well, he's gone on record many a times as saying he's a huge fan of Buster Keaton, which
that makes sense.
You can see, especially with something like Project A. The Keaton is huge in that. So, I don't think there's... Unless you got anything else to add? Ariel, James, anything, final thoughts on Who Am I?
I'm glad I watched it, just to say that I did, but yeah.
That's fair enough. it's one to tick off. I will have to find out what that one is before we end the episode. I just really cannot remember it. The one with the car stunts. But James, anything left to say?
I don't think I have anything else to say. It's Jackie Chan at a transitional point of his career, but he's had lower points than this.
Yeah, I mean, one bit of trivia aside, he made The Protector, which was his first attempt at doing an American movie. It went so catastrophically bad, he went to Hong Kong and made Police Story. So, you know.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's a fun fact.
Yeah. No, I can't find what that one was. That's going to bug me for weeks now. It really is.
By any chance, was that Jackie Chan film Thunderbolt?
That might be it, yeah.
I'm going to write that down.
Because I don't believe there's much fighting in that one. I think he's mostly just Jackie Chan.
Sports car mechanic has to beat a super criminal street racer.
Oh, yeah. That sounds exactly like my wheelhouse. I'm so excited to watch that.
It's just sort of a hazy memory in the past that I've seen it. Yeah, but put a name on it. That is fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, James.
Don't thank me. Thank Letterboxd.
I thought they'd never go home.
Mrs. Wilberforce, I don't think you quite understand the intricacies of this particular situation. Let me try to explain, Mrs. Wilberforce. You see, in this case, it would do no good to take the money back. As strange as it may seem to you, nobody wants the money back.
Oh, don't expect me to believe that.
But it's true, Mrs. Wilberforce. You see, this particular shipment of money was insured. So now the insurance company simply pays to the factory £60,000, and then, in order to recover its money, it puts 1 farthing on all premiums, on all the policies for the next year. You see? So how much real harm have we done anybody? 1 farthing's worth, Mrs. Wilberforce, 1 farthing's worth. Now, you hadn't thought of it like that, had you?
Hey, you know what? I never thought of it like that either.
Surely it isn't as simple as all that.
Just stepping away from the conversation for a moment about Jackie Chan to do a little bit of a mid-roll again. If you like the podcast, please do subscribe wherever you get it and give it a rating or review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Also, just for clarity, this is the penultimate episode of Season 1. After next week's episode, I'll finally be done with the weekly uploads. Finally! And it'll have a month-long break. And there'll be no podcasts in that month break, but there will be a video that I am working on, which will basically be the top 5 videos of top 5 movies of Season 1. It'll be a personal stance, because if it's academic, it's going to be kind of obvious, and I don't think there's much fun in doing a video like that. But you find that on the Geek Show's YouTube. And also another little announcement, there's a bit at the end of the show where I invite some people on to talk about movies that we've been watching, and genuinely, I've really, really enjoyed doing these. So I don't just want to cut them out and stop doing them now that those little sort of fill-in recordings have served their purpose. I want to do it essentially as the butter to the podcast. So I'll be recording episodes all the time, trying to keep it in advance and just stay ahead of schedule. As is the podcasting way, but in between, like, these episodes go every fortnight, as they're used to. But in between that fortnight, or however it falls in the timeline, I will do a further episode once a month, talking about those movies that we've been watching. And the first one, when we come back in August, will be about Fright Fest. So lots of horror, because it seems to be a thing that we do on the podcast. Lots of horror talk. So may as well lean into it. So yeah, we'll be looking for that to come back very soon in the next upcoming season. But one more episode, and that one episode is going to be decided in this clip here. But we've got 381 directors, so the next director we're going to be doing, so the next director will be number 102, who is... Where are we? 102. Who is Alexander McKendrick?
Name doesn't mean anything to me off the top of my head. Alexander McKendrick.
If I remember, I think it's the Lady Killers. he might be. Yeah.
Oh, he was an Ealing comedy guy. Right, okay.
Well, that's the second one we've had after Robert Herman. But yeah, Lady Killers is a classic. I'll go to the hilt on that one. That should be interesting, I think. I mean, it's clear you two don't have a horse in this race.
No, I've never seen any of his films.
Same.
I take it 1952's Mandy isn't the original version of that thing with Nick Cage.
Well,
can you imagine a 1952 version of that Mandy?
Yeah, I don't know who'd play that role. Terry Thomas? That'd be different.
Oh, I'd watch that.
I don't know otherwise. But yeah, I mean, if you haven't seen anything by him, Lady Killers is one of those movies, like classic British movies, which I think anybody needs to really give a go. Beyond that, we'll see.
Devil Times 5 is the fast-paced podcast in which comedians and horror experts dissect a different theme, franchise or subgenre each month before playing a round of horror's hardest quiz. Scary noises. So, for hot takes and piss takes, listen to Devil Times 5, the British horror podcast that knows how to have fun.
Jump into our second movie of the night, which I have gone on record multiple times of calling probably one of the greatest action movies ever made, which is no small sort of a claim to fame from me. 1985's Police Story. So, James did the other synopsis. Ariel, do you want to have a stab at Police Story, what that one's about?
Yeah, I'll take the easier one, thanks. It's much more straightforward. Jackie Chan plays a police officer. I believe Kakui is how you say his name. In some versions, I guess he's called Kevin, but not in any version I've seen. And he's a good cop. He's an honest cop. He cares a lot about his job. He's not a very good partner to his girlfriend, but he's a great cop. And he gets framed for the murder of another police officer as he's trying to take down this crime lord. And so he gets caught up trying to clear his name and also take down this crime lord and save his relationship. And he's making friends with the woman he's supposed to protect, who is the secretary of the crime lord that he's taking down. So it's a much more straightforward police story, as it's called. And that plot, I think, works very well for the tying together of set pieces as they wanted to do. You know, the plot doesn't have to be complicated to give us everything we want out of that.
No. So, James, what do you think of this one? We'll go with you first.
Oh, no biggie. I just think it's one of the best action films I've ever seen.
Yeah, it kind of is, isn't it?
It's fantastic. The first time I saw it was maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago. And the entire time my jaw was just dropped. I couldn't believe what I was watching. Like every minute something exciting or funny or both was happening. And I was just like, how have I gone my whole life with this movie in existence and me not watching it? So now I just want to watch as much as possible and get caught up. It's wonderful.
I mean, that opening sequence, I don't even know why you... It is literally the very definition of a one-shot deal, because he effectively builds the town, a little shanty town on the side of a mountain, and destroys it. It's... And from that, he decides that I know what would be a great scenario, going back to that story of him. I've got two sequences to lend the cap. I know what one of those great sequences would be. I'm going to chase after a bus of an umbrella.
It's amazing this shoot had any survivors.
Yeah, because I don't even know how to process it, really. It's such a... He had to have such little regard for himself, honestly. He come barreling down the side of that hill in a car,
Yeah.
And then, it's... And somebody sort of verbalise that sequence a little bit, Ellen. Just wow, I guess.
It feels like the kind of sequence a film would end on, but this feels like the kind of thing it goes, this is what we're starting with. Brace yourselves.
Buckle up. You know, like it tells you right away at the beginning, this is the level that, you know, we take ourselves seriously, but not too seriously. You're in for a lot of action and a lot of fun. Like it tells you right away, this is what you came here for. And then it delivers on that the entire time. So it's a bold way to start a movie, because like you said, it's how another movie might end. But then it delivers on that easily.
Yeah. When you think about certain tropes in cop movies of that era, we have the hard-nosed police chief who scolds the younger detective for being reckless and taking too many chances and being dangerous. When you watch other movies and you compare it to Police Story, none of those things really hold up there. When you compare anything to a situation like this, it kind of makes other police action movies seem kind of just slow.
Yes. And it's hilarious because after that scene where he destroys a town with a car and, flies on a bus, he gets promoted. He gets a little bit of a wrist slap back at the station. They're like, you shouldn't have done that. You don't do it this way. Do it by the book. And then they give him a promotion and he gets to do like a photo shoot. I was just like, this guy's life is crazy.
Yeah. So,
it's interesting how pretty much they use this opportunity. Any film would use it as, oh no, you're too, like you said, you're too reckless. You're a loose cannon, all the cop cliches. And in this opportunity, his higher ups are like, you know what? Let's use him as a marketing tool for recruitment. Let's sell the idea of him being a model policeman and use him for our own purposes. It's an interesting idea to twist it on.
Yeah, it's a funny movie, really. I mean, it is built around those two action scenes. What about the middle? How does it manage the middle? Because that is the sink or swim for its success, really.
I think it stays exciting throughout. I mean, there's plenty of good fights that sort of break it up throughout. There's, I love the scene in Selena's home when Jackie Chan has hired a fake killer to come after her to prove she needs protection. And then the goons really do come after her in the parking lot. Like, that whole sequence is both funny and exciting. I love, it's a little bit more key, but it's so physically impressive when he's like reassigned to the slower police station later in the movie and he's zooming all around the room on his wheelie chairs, answering different phones and getting tangled up in the cords. Like, that just must have taken a lot of choreography to get that down right. So even though it's not, car stunts and explosions and fighting, it's still really physically impressive. And so I think throughout it gives you just enough, without being too overwhelming to get you through to the end. I think it holds together.
I fully agree with that. I think, as Ariel said about the scene where he's trying to juggle all these calls on the phone and it's all going wrong, and he's telling his girlfriend about, accidentally telling her about morning after pills. That's it. And especially when they're trying to fake that home invasion, and it just all goes so wrong. It feels like this is leaning into the Buster Keaton style influence and really pairing up the slapstick in a way that works so well. And it peppers in the action as the action in between as well, where you get Chan showing off his stunts. And I think it's just, it could be in a lesser hands, just the zone you can skip while you watch the big set pieces, but I think it justifies itself and justifies the entire movie rather than just being a good film with two memorable bits.
Oh, but they're beyond memorable, but yeah, entirely. I'm going to go out on a limb here, which is sort of prefacing what we're going to do after this section, but I don't find this that funny.
Oh, really?
Is it a controversial opinion, maybe? Because it seems like the sequence is based around, well, one of the big comedy sequences. I do think the bit with the phones is just, it's not so much funny, but incredibly impressive in the way that Buster Keaton movies where I don't know how you physically did this. This is so very, very impressive. And there's bits more based around the dialogue. I can't remember who plays who, but when he's, I think Bridget Lynn plays his girlfriend, and he's looking after Maggie Chung. I don't know which way round it falls, but when he's in the shower and he's describing his girlfriend and his girlfriend stood there, doesn't really age it that well. I don't mean it in a sort of like a sexual politics way. It's just really sort of dumb, cheesy comedy, really, isn't it?
The thing I enjoy about that scene, I agree with you. There's definitely some as there are in many 80s action movies, some gender stuff that did not age well. That's harder to watch now. And like some of the jokes he's telling when he's on the phones doing the chords, like those jokes themselves have that dialogue could be different. But the scene when he's in the shower and May is still in his home and he doesn't realize it, and Selena's trying to get him to say nice things about May. I'm not laughing at May in that scene. I'm laughing at him because Selena's lobbing him a softball, trying to go, hey, man, I'm trying to help you out and save your relationship here. And he's just botching it. And so Selena and May come together in that scene to go, this guy's a jerk. I'm going to throw a cake in his face and I'm going to get out of here. And they're like, yeah, I'm going to help you out with that. So I think that scene's funny, but maybe not for the reason the filmmakers wanted me to.
That's a really good reading, actually, because when you look at some of his other movies and the character that he plays, let's be honest, it's a bit of a creep with women. He tends to do that quite often. So if you look at this, like a gentle sprinkling of subversion of those characters that he'd later play.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's like later on when your career's big and perhaps somebody gets a bit of an ego and they see themselves as the ladies' man who can do no wrong no matter what they do or say. This feels definitely like an earlier point, which kind of tackles that idea head on and just says, oh yeah, all that bravado? No, you ain't worth shit, man.
Yeah. And also it's Maggie Chung and Bridget Lin, who are just sort of institutions of Hong Kong cinema. Let's be honest, they're both great. So the last bit, which probably one of the greatest action scenes of all time. Contrary to Who Am I think this is entirely earned because the bad guy who was played by Chow Yuen, who's a famed Hong Kong action director too, kind of horrible, and it basically creates a situation where Jackie Chan's character is broken and battered and just he's almost lost everything really. So this is incredible validation as well as an incredible sequence of scenes.
See, he's earned it throughout the entire film, but it's just the end. If it was just the end when he's kicking May down the stairs, it would still feel all that earned because
he does that. She takes a tumble.
Yeah, that just felt an extra bit of sadistic. Like he was in a rush, but there's no reason to kick someone down the stairs, and so just having him get viscerally annihilated at the end is just exactly what you need after all that.
Yes, and he does get a good kicking, Chow Yuen. Doesn't he get, if I can remember it correctly, he repeatedly kicked in the stomach over and over again, or is it repeatedly punched in the face over and over again?
Stomach, and then he's in the trolley and rolls back into glass.
Yes, because that is kind of symbolic of the scene in large, really. It's just Jackie Chan and his stunt troupe throwing each other through stuff and off stuff.
Apparently they nicknamed this film Glass Story because of how much sugar glass they broke.
I mean,
there's a lot of glass. Yeah. The phone booth.
I'm a fan of wrestling. I think it came from like Hong Kong action movies. But even this sequence is still a bit sucking the air through your teeth. It's just hard to watch at some point.
I'm also a fan of professional wrestling, and I have been for a long time. And something that I think when wrestling's at its best, it's telling a successful story. And I think that Police Story really does that because the physicality in Police Story is not just about the fighting and the violence. It's also conveying a lot of emotion and even doing work that maybe some dialogue couldn't throughout the different pieces of the movie that we've talked about, where physicality is a part of the story that's being told. And so I think that's really special in this movie. And, people going through sugar glass is great on its own anyway.
Yeah, it's not just sugar glass as well. It's one of these stunts that's just repeated. I think probably the most times I've ever seen a stunt repeated in a Jackie Chan movie, where he jumps from one floor of the supermarket, the shopping centre, to another using a light on a string, effectively, and breaking the glass of each light with his hands, and then falling through some veranda. I don't know how he's not dead, honestly, even just from this movie.
just that sequence, he got second-degree burns because of all the lights. And to be fair, you suffer that much, of course you're going to make sure people get a good look at it by repeating it another 2 times.
That's exactly right. Yep.
Yeah, I think there's in the police story too, which I don't know if I've ever seen, but there's a stunt where he jumps off the top of a bus and he jumps through the wrong bit of glass. And I think that the one bit of glass that wasn't sugar. And I think he killed himself. Yeah.
Oh no!
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's some grim stunts that have gone horribly wrong for him in this movie. But I don't know how to tackle this one really, as far as action scenes. Is there any particularly favourite bits in this end section?
Is it too easy to just say my favourite is the string of lights? It's just what I think of when I think of Police Story, and I know that's very basic, but it's so good.
I mean, sometimes stereotypes are stereotypes because they're true and they're right.
Yeah.
It's the only option, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got to be the string of lights, but I also really liked as soon as the bike comes into play, because just it jumping over Jackie Chan when he's hidden under that step, it feels like, how are you not dead?
That is so scary. I forgot about that, and then when I rewatched this again this weekend, I got really nervous for Jackie Chan.
It's just, as an action movie, it can't, I know it's not really what you call a dangerous action movie or a dangerous movie in any sort of a sense of the word, really. But at the same time, it kind of is. It makes like action movies that you see now with the green screen shoots feel kind of sterile. Maybe.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't want to advocate for people putting their lives in danger for my own entertainment. But like I said, I'm a fan of wrestling. And so like, I am very impressed by, live theater with stunt work. And so I always appreciate it when I see it.
Yeah, it's like the difference between Christopher Nolan doing the truck flip in The Dark Knight and, say, a big CGI sequence in another superhero film. It's like, I can appreciate both, and I appreciate you not wanting to put the people in harm's way, but at the same time, it just looks so much better.
Mm-hmm. And it's gonna look better. It's gonna look good forever, Yeah,
so I appreciate that talking about action cinema is kind of awkward because it's like talking about comedy. Why is this comedy good? It just made me laugh. It's such a personal experience that you can't talk about it in the way you talk about other movies, perhaps. But so any sort of thoughts left over, really, for Jackie Chan's Police Story that we haven't touched on yet?
It just feels like it's designed for him to shine. And I suppose that can be the case when you write, direct, and star and stunt coordinate and set everything up for yourself to be successful. But it really, it's just a flex for him. Yes,
it certainly is. I don't know how, sort of timeline-wise, whether this coincides with his ascent to sort of superstardom. I assume it'd be around now, because effectively, off the back of this, it stopped being Golden Harvest and effectively became Jackie Chan's production company, given how many of his films they put out. But yeah, that does make sense. James?
I think it's interesting how this film was essentially Jackie Chan, as you said, he failed to break into the US market, so he just went back to Hollywood and was like, I'll show you, I'm just going to make my own films. And then this one seemed like it was one of the big breakout ones, which really showed how good Jackie Chan could do it. And I mean, this got loads of sequels. I think it's still going now. Yeah, still going. And you don't really get that with a half-assed film from over 35 years ago, I'd hope. But I think it's a real testament to this film that it's over 35 years old and it still looks so damn good. It's
ageless, in fact. Yeah. Okay, so to close out this part of the show, usually the director in question also doesn't have like a illustrious career as an actor, so I think I have to separate this question in half. The first one, what do we both think of Jackie Chan as a director?
I have a very high opinion of him as a director. I think Who Am I had some strange directing, but I feel a little bit validated in both of you saying before that wasn't one of his best. So as a director, I think when he gets to really run the show and be in charge of things and do things the way he wants to, they come out really well.
Yeah, I think when he can really let loose and let his creativity just pour onto the screen, like with Police Story, he's so darn good. And even with something which is not as well executed all over the board, like Who Am I think he still has enough talent and interest which shines through, that he's not just one who's a director for hire or just someone who's like, oh, really? I think there's genuine interest to what he does and as a director.
Yeah, this is a bold statement, but I think he's, as far as a director intent, he's a director of pure cinema, really. When he's at his best, whether it's, I'd say, Project A, that one's truly spectacular too, or Police Story, it's just pure cinema. Just to go back to the analogy of wrestling, if there's a good wrestling match with the right story being told and the right level of athleticism, you can show it to anybody and then think, yes, that is good, that I can appreciate that for what it is and the spectacle that it's trying to put across. And that is best. Jackie Chan is exactly the same. Pure cinema, and if you show the right person at the right time, the right movie, will absolutely fall head over heels in it, in love with it, and Police Story is one of those.
Yes.
Agreed.
The other side of that question, Jackie Chan, the actor, what do we both think of that? Or him, I should say.
I think there's less of a hit ratio compared to his directorial career. I mean, I think he's a very charming persona. I think there's a reason he was such a big star and he still headlines movies today. And a lot of it comes down to just how charming and likable he is on screen. But I am going to admit there was a point where, usually around, I think it was The Spy Next Door or that kind of era, where I just lost interest and maybe I'll go back and try that stuff. There might be some gems in there. But then there's that weird film he did with Arnold Schwarzenegger where they were just in it for 5 minutes and it was much longer than 5 minutes. It was called The Iron Mask.
Can't even remember that, I'll be honest.
I think it came out during lockdown, so just one of those in a stream of lockdown releases. But he's whatever his output, I still think he's a charming guy and a great presence.
I'd have to agree completely. I mean, I would watch him do something as boring as make toast because he would probably make it exciting. But I think his charm and his charisma and his physical ability carries him a long way to where his acting chops don't need to be as strong to get him through, and I think that they're not.
There's a story that particularly sort of pricked my ears up when it was in the press a while ago from Michelle Yeoh, who did an interview. I think it was for Shang-Chi. I'm just looking for the part now. It's Chan was... Michelle Yeoh's talking about Chan wanting the movie they did together. I think it was Police Story 3, Super Cop, which is a very hard movie to get hold of. I would like to see that one. But she said Chan once pleaded with her not to perform those crazy stunts. This is Michelle Yeoh talking. She said, I told him, you're a fine one to ask me to stop. You're always doing them. Chan said in that instance, that's because when you do one, I always have to go one better. That's the pressure. That pressure was on him, poor dude. The interviewer says, is that true? He thinks women belong in the kitchen rather than action movies? Yeoh said, he used to until I kicked his butt. An advert for Michelle Yeoh as much as anything. But just to go off what James said, really, he's an action star for a reason. He's one of the most recognisable actors on the planet for a reason. And I think, honestly, that's just down to his charisma on stage. He might not be the most likeable person in reality. He's become a bit of a face for the Communist Party in China in current years. But in his limelight, in his era where he was at the peak of his powers, he's literally one of the most famous people on the planet, and it was entirely earned. Ariel, where can we find you online?
You can find me on Twitter at Ari_Hellraiser. and all my work will be posted there.
Excellent. And James?
You can find me on Twitter and Letterboxd at RoddersJ04, spelt with 2 Ds, and I write reviews for Moving Pictures Film Club and over at my site, thereviewingrodders.co.uk. So, yeah, check it out.
I know you're scared and you want to go home. I'll take you home soon. It's just that I gotta be upstairs for a while. Something's come up.
What?
Never mind. What?
Someone's coming. I'll scream. If someone's upstairs, they'll hear me.
With the door shut, no one can hear anything down here. I soundproofed it myself. So shout if you like, you won't bother anyone.
If you try to touch me, I'll scratch your face. And whoever's coming will see and ask why.
This face?
So, dropping Jackie Chan off at the nearest bus station because he's been a dirty old man, we move on into the last part of the show, which invites some new voices on to talk about some stuff that we have been watching. I've been joined by Graham. Hello.
Hello.
YGRAINE. Hi.
Hi.
And Kat. Hello there.
Hi. Hi.
How's you all doing?
Well, not bad, yeah.
You know, that's usually the icebreaker segment, is it?
Yeah, the ice is pretty intact at this point, isn't it?
Yeah, so nothing. Anybody wants to say? Just okay, that's it.
Well, I'm suffering like an Irish person in the heat at the moment, so I have a very burnt back at the moment. So yeah, I've retreated to my very dark bedroom.
Kat?
Yeah, well, I was following on from that, I live in a relatively new build, which is great in winter, but terrible at this time of year. Like on Friday, I think it hit like 34 outside the house and like 38 in the house. So that's really fun when you have a 3-year-old.
Yeah.
So
You have to mop me up and put me in like a little cup. If it's got that hot anyway.
I mean, the cats have spent sort of the last week looking like they belong in a Dali painting. They're just sort of like melting off of everything that they sit on. So,
well, as the internet is very good at saying, the cats are made out of liquid.
Yes,
it's true.
Fitting cups and all sorts of things. So, anyhow, I'll go left to right. Graham, you're up first. What have you been watching?
Well, I've watched a documentary recently that I didn't actually like, but has sort of lingered with me in an unexpected way. It's called Moments Like This Never Last, and it's on Mubi at the moment. And it's by a first-time director, I think, called Cheryl Dunn. It's about an artist called Dash Snow, who started out on the graffiti and skateboarding scene in New York in the late 90s and made the jump to gallery art. And I was watching it and I was thinking, is it possible to make a good documentary about an artist while also leaving you with the impression that no one in this scene could even make good art at all? And
well, it's a thing about horror movies, isn't it? It's like horror movies where it's all about the sort of creation of art and losing themselves in that art. There's so many of them. There was that one on Netflix a few years ago.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about this as...
And the art is always awful.
Velvet Buzzsaw, When Not Enough People Die. Yeah.
Oh, no, I mean the art was awful.
Oh, right, right.
That's the theme of these movies where it's about artists making art and it's like they lose themselves and all the sense of selves and you see the art and you think, is that it? Is that all you did all that for?
Yes. Well, it's like any fictional movie about a fictional novelist will always have a bit where they read out a bit of their novel and you're just listening to thinking, this is shite. No one would buy this.
It's so common. It's so common.
But this is a documentary, and I think you can make a documentary about a bad artist. You know, I'm thinking of Mr. Brainwash in Exit Through the Gift Shop in particular. But this is really eager to impress on you that Dash Snow was a real outsider talent who caught the tenor of his time. And then you look at his art and it's just him and his poor little rich kid friend snorting coke. And you think, Not sure anyone would be magnetised by this if it wasn't taking place in certain postal districts of New York, to be honest.
What, is that where it took place?
Oh, of course it does. You've got a rich dropout who became a junkie and everyone mistook him for an artist. Where do you think it happens? Croydon.
Of course it's New York, isn't it?
But despite all that, I came out of it with the impression that Snow was no kind of artist at all, but Dunn maybe. I mean, the way that she assembles the footage that they all shot of each other at this time does have a certain kind of you're stuck in there with them quality. It has a certain kind of inside of you with that moment where someone's artistic career blows up. It's just that then it has to like cut to a load of scenesters saying that actually these Polaroids of their friends on the toilet were the most important art to come out of America in the 90s. And one of the people talking about this is Larry Clark, because of course it fucking is. But
say what you really feel, Graham. I mean, please do, come on.
It is more aggravating to think back to this and talk about it than it is to actually watch it. To watch it, it does have an authentic kind of scuzzy 90s feel I found weirdly alluring. And I think that's got to be all on Dunn, right? That has got to be all on the director, because the subject matter is not good.
Okay. You've not compelled me to ever watch that, but okay.
I haven't, and to be fair, I wasn't aiming to, but I've had the film stuck in my head for about a week now, so everyone else is going to have to suffer with it.
That's fair enough. YGRAINE, yourself, what have you been watching?
I did quite a lot of rewatches this week, mainly because I was in Devon last week with family, and I really hope they don't listen to this, but I came home and was like, I need to watch a lot of French extremity and a lot of violence to recover from that. So I watched Martyrs and High Tension. But one film that I gave a new watch to this week is it's a Mexican film called The Old Ways. And it's on Netflix, directed by Christopher Allender. And it's kind of like a Mexican / American folk horror, and it has a really good kind of basic underlying plot where this woman who is originally from this very remote village in Mexico comes back. She has drug abuse problems, and her great auntie is a bruja, and they try and exorcise her demons, and it's an actual demon, but it gets very lost. And I'm really into possession stories that are outside the Judeo-Christian kind of formula that we see quite, like, I'm a massive possession horror fan, but I'm always really interested in possession set in another culture and like other kind of belief systems. And so I had quite high hopes for it, but it was like they'd gotten this really good Mexican folk story and then put it through like Blumhouse. And it just didn't quite pull any punches, and I was really disappointed by it. So I wouldn't recommend you watching it unless you just want to see, some different forms of possession.
Is it a Netflix original? Because there's always the killer question with...
I don't think it is.
I think it was an acquisition.
I always fall into that trap. That maybe this is the original Netflix horror movie that actually is good, and then you watch it and you know it never is. There was another Mexican one from a few years ago. I don't know if you saw that, where it's effective. It might be this. I don't know the name of it actually. Where two different possessed people fight off against each other. It's really bizarre because one person's possessed and they can't do anything about it. So they think, how are we going to solve that? I know, we'll get somebody else possessed and let them fight. I thought that sounds fun.
That sounds like a WWE storyline. Like, I'm not going to lie.
I'm really imagining it. I don't know, but it was not good.
It's like a Kane and Undertaker kind of storyline there.
How can you mess up possession slap fight as a concept?
That's what I thought when I pressed play, but they did. It's just a slot in my memory said file not found, and I've got it right now. So, Kat, what have you been watching?
So I went to the press screening of The Black Phone last week, which is in cinemas today. They sort of made it into a big party before the press screening itself. There was some Britain's Got Talent magicians working the room.
Wow.
They had some drag queens there who were just there, and their energy sort of like made the screening, because The Black Phone has been a film that I've been really looking forward to all year, because I love Joe Hill's short story. I love a lot of what Joe Hill does. He's definitely got his dad's talent for writing, but I think he's also got his dad's problem with adaptations. And there's some that are good and some that are bad, and I'm still sort of trying to work out with Joe Hill where his good ones are, because I like elements of The Black Phone, but it didn't quite push into the areas that I would have hoped it did. It keeps the essence of the short story. The short story is only 20 pages, and I mean that's it's literally verbatim. The characters are saying the dialogue straight from the story, but then they expand it out. So one of the things that I like about the short is it's straight in with the it's about a serial child abductor called The Grabber, and the short story starts with the main kid being grabbed. And then there's the occasional like throwaway lines to previous victims, but this spends a good 40 minutes setting up the lead up to this kid getting grabbed, which just made it a little bit too pedestrian and formulaic for my liking. And then towards the end, it kind of fizzles out. It's got some great performances. There's Madeleine McGraw, who plays the younger sister role. She just steals every scene that she's in. She is hilarious. She's akin to Lucas's sister from Stranger Things. She's kind of got that. Yeah. She's at similar age, and she's got that same sort of like sassy, bold, like just talking back to the grown-ups sort of thing going on with her. But the overall film, considering it's from Scott Derrickson, who did Sinister, reteamed with Ethan Hawke from a story from the son of Stephen King, I was hoping more for something in line with Sinister, and it's a little tonally all over the place. It's not quite terrifying, and it's not quite uber camp. It's sort of scene to scene goes from, now we're going to try and really scare you with a jump scare, and now we're going to try and make you laugh with this like hilarious comedic character. So there was a big sort of jar there for me. But, you know, if you've got nothing else to do on a Friday or Saturday night, it's great watched with an audience full of strangers. Like I say, there were some drag queens in the audience who were like properly giving it. There was people, you know, screaming out, "Oh, hell no," and there was applause and stuff. And that's, you know, that's what you want when you go and see a horror film. So, you know, if you get the right audience, it's going to make a really fun night out.
It never happens with me that, you know, I see a horror movie with the right audience. When I go to see a horror movie with an audience that have kids talking behind me at the Babadook saying, "Oh no, Marmaduke's going to get him." It's like, oh, come on. You're ruining everything. But Scott Derrickson's the funny one. I think Sinister, the best horror scenes that Scott Derrickson has done are those little found footage movies in Sinister. And everything he's done outside of those little scenelets, it's been quite safe, I felt.
Yeah, I had this feeling watching the trailer for The Black Phone, and I don't want to sound like I'm putting limits on what horror can do. I think that I can imagine a very good horror that is about that kind of stranger danger kind of evil and that fear of essentially paedophiles, isn't it? I don't know if that's what it ends up being about, but when you've got kids on the side of milk cartons and kids being pulled into vans, that's what you're meant to think about. And I thought, I don't want to say horror can't tackle this, because I don't believe that. I just don't think Scott Derrickson's kind of horror has the gravitas, if that's fair. I don't know.
You want somebody a bit more not careless, that sounds the wrong word, a bit more carefree. Just sort of jumps into projects both legs first.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I don't know who I would say should be doing this, actually, the more I think about it. Yeah, I don't know. I'll just say Cronenberg. He's my fallback answer for everything.
Well, he did a little bit of that with The Brood. Horrifying children-based horror.
I find Scott Derrickson's really good at horror when it's black and white horror, where it's a really clear villain monster, where it comes, you know, like Sinister, very clear horror. Exorcism of Emily Rose, very clear horror. But I find when he tries to go too deep with it, with stuff like Deliver Us from Evil, when he tries to go a bit too deep, he loses that a bit, and you just think, oh, shut up, mate, like just get on with the, you know, the horror bit, you know. So I think that's a real shame, and I was really looking forward to seeing The Black Phone, and I actually got invited to my first like proper screening here in Ireland, because we don't really hold a lot of these kind of screenings, and I got invited to it, and I was like, damn it, I'm with my family that week. So, but I'm glad I got to hear your opinion of it, Kat, because now I'm not feeling so bad about missing it.
I'm not going to say much about this because I don't think you can, but I watched Mad God, which is now finally on Shudder. And I don't know how much you can really say about this. Because what it is, I think it's 30 years that Phil Tippett, who's done effects for all sorts of movies, his passion project, which includes a guy in Second World War sort of gas mask paraphernalia, walking through a vision of hell while all sorts of stuff happens. Lots of shitting animals, bleeding animals, just abominations everywhere you can look, really. I don't really know how much you can say about it, but as like a technical exercise in animation, it's absolutely stunning. It will turn the stomach of a lot of people who think, oh, an animated movie, an animated horror, that'll be fun. But no, I think about 10 minutes before you realise that, hang on, no, this is just grotesque from the feet to the head. It really does hold nothing back whatsoever. So I think I like it a great deal, but I don't ever want to watch it again. Basically, it's unforgettable nightmare image all over the place.
Yeah, I made the mistake of starting to watch it at about 1 a.m. It was a thing. It was for its Grimfest screening, and it was like there was parts where it's like, have I fallen asleep now? And like, cause it's going to mess your dreams up if you watch it anywhere close to bed. And it was like, am I still awake? Because this shit is just crazy.
Yeah. There's a bit in it where the assassin, apparently he's called, walks past these giants who are getting electrocuted, and the electrocution is causing them to shit themselves, and it goes down this little funnel which goes down and makes energy for other things to feed off. It's like everything sort of interlinked like that, and it's all gross. It's the sweatiest, grossest animation movie I've ever seen.
It sounds like what would happen if Hard to Be a God was made by Games Workshop.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. But it's incredible. There's a bit in the one bit of live action has Alex Cox in it, the Repo Man director, and it just feels so at odds with everything else. I don't really know how to explain it, but it's just like in the middle of a video game, it stopped being a video game, and then actors started acting out the next level. I think that's probably the best way to describe it. It just stands out like a sore thumb. But if you can stomach it, it's entirely worth watching, as gross as it is. So, yeah, Graham.
This is going to be one of those weeks, isn't it, where everyone says, oh, I've watched these really terrifying horror films, and then I come in at the end and go, yeah, I've watched something quite poncy this week, just for balance. I watched a low-budget French film, but it's maybe not as at odds with some of the other stuff we've been talking about, because I watched Damien O'Dougal's Theo and the Metamorphosis, which is a very strange film that has pissed an awful lot of people off. And, you know, I'm not a negative person. I do not like to be contrarian when it's sniping at the thing everyone loves. I love to be contrarian when I found the thing everyone hates and I can say, yeah, really like that, actually. It's the story of a guy called Theo with Down syndrome who's living a more or less primitive existence out in the woods with his father, who has reportedly raised him here since he was born. There is very scant information about his background, and most of it seems to take place within Theo's head, where he has all these bizarre, elaborate dreams and sexual fantasies and nightmares, including one genital injury, which is really, boy, it's something. And I liked this for several reasons. I like how weird and original it is. I think you can compare it to some like underground British filmmakers like Ben Rivers or Andrew Cotting, but it's definitely got its own vibe. I like that it has a protagonist who is disabled, but is also really capable and can like go down into caves and survive in the woods and has a functioning sex life, and it does all these other things that disabled people never do in Oscar bait films, and I thought that was a really interesting take on disability in film. And I also just like the fact that it isn't about... There's this word now, normalising, which gets applied to a lot of films that have an outsider protagonist or deal with a minority community. And in a lot of ways, normalisation is lovely. It's a very warm, inclusive thing. But sometimes I think, can you not just let people be outsiders? Can you not just let people be weirdos rather than welcome them into everything? And
it's positive discrimination, isn't it? How if it's an outsider group, every example of it has to be the most positive and brilliant example of that group.
Exactly.
That outsider group's not allowed to be nuts and get a bit dirty.
We can only extend our sympathy to them if they end up becoming like us, apparently. And I mean, spoiling nothing here, Theo never gets like us. He doesn't start like us. He doesn't end like us. He is living his own weird, messed up life out in the woods. And he's great at it. It's the perfect environment for him. And I admired that kind of spikiness. It feels like it feels like a long time since I've seen a film with that kind of unapologetic outsider attitude. So I would say, by all means see it. You might hate it. A lot of people have. But for me, it was just the kind of punky, unfriendly film that I wanted to see.
Interesting. YGRAINE.
So I watch a lot of horror, like a lot of horror. We're talking like nearly 10 horror films a week. So I need something that balances that out. And it's usually trash reality TV shows. So this week, my trash reality TV shows has been Catfish. And I have just been rewatching Catfish and reveling in these people's misfortunes who find themselves on the end of someone pretending to be other people on the internet. And I'm very ashamed to admit it, but I love it. If it's not that, it's like 90 Day Fiancé, but yeah. So I just need that balance in my head where it's not like everyone getting cut up all the time. It needs to be people getting cut up emotionally instead.
It's horror then, totally.
Yeah.
It's amazing how that movie and that TV show just became sort of, everybody knew what Catfish was after them. Before, nobody had a clue.
Well, the makers do have a horror connection, don't they? Henry Joost and Ariel Schulman, wasn't it, who directed the film? Yeah. And they went on to do some of the Paranormal Activity sequels.
They did one called, they did a Blumhouse one called Viral as well, about a parasite pandemic film with people trapped inside their houses. This was Lionsgate released it over here. I think it was on Netflix at some point.
Okay. See, when I originally saw the Catfish, the movie, I don't know why, I had it in my head that it was a horror film, so I was like waiting for the horror to start, and then when it didn't, I was like, that wasn't a horror film.
But you say that, but there's that scene where they go and find the house at night, and I was like the same as you. I was like, what's going to happen? Something's going to happen here. So it's not a horror, but there is like plenty of sort of setups that feel like you are watching something that could very, very quickly turn into some sort of horror.
Yeah, especially when you're like a found footage fan as well. So you're just like, this is pure fodder. Like,
they should have gone to a house and asked her to pretend to be a serial killer.
Well, it was, wasn't it in trouble, that movie, for faking a lot of it? Or have I just imagined something?
There was a lot of debate when it came out about, can this possibly be real? But I don't think anyone's really found a smoking gun on that. I don't know.
Okay. But yes, you definitely need these palate cleansers. I mean, with Mad God, you have to watch like the season finale of Taskmaster just before bed. I wasn't sleeping. Kat?
So I went to the cinema to see Lightyear and Jurassic World Dominion. Lightyear the cat is amazing in it, but it wasn't. I don't know what I was expecting. But
did I get in a lot of trouble for having not trouble. That's a very loose word that I'm using. The internet, the worst face of the internet, got all the knickers in a twist because there's a same-sex kiss in it.
There's a same-sex couple, but it's Disney. It's not like it's focused or lingered on, as they don't with a same-sex with a heterosexual kiss. It's just there's this couple and they're both the same sex and they're raising a child. It's sort of it's glimpses across the years, sort of like the opening of Up.
Right.
But not as depressing. You see sort of glimpses of this peripheral characters who are in a relationship together. But it just, I don't know what I was expecting, but I think Pixar have definitely moved away from making films for kids with elements for adults and now just make films for grown-ups with elements for kids, because there was a lot of kids in my screen and they all got pretty restless, including my 3-year-old who happily sat through the bad guys twice without moving. But Lightyear deals with some heavy emotional issues that at 3 years old you're just not ready to process. So we like the bits with the cat, and then outside of that it was the age old let's go to the toilet 20 times.
Does it have that's sort of on Pixar movies, that's the thing that they're all sort of built around, isn't it? Does it have that moment that just tears through you like tissue paper? I mean, Coco had one that destroyed me, that movie. But does Lightyear have one? Yeah, I mean, it's in a way, I guess, the sort of a live action film I would sort of relate it to is something like Interstellar. So it's dealing with time, like traveling through space, and how it's minutes for one person, but it's years for another, and so that leads to some tear-jerking moments. And yeah, like I say, I also endured Dominion, which, as somebody that went to see the first Jurassic Park film 3 times as a 7-year-old in the cinema, it's very disappointing that that's where the franchise ended. Playing devil's advocate, there's a lot of hate for this. Oh, so much. It's not that bad, is it? For me, there's been a lot of films recently which have tapped into nostalgia of other films. I think Top Gun Maverick did a really good job at paying respect to Top Gun without constantly ramming stuff down your throat. But this is literally the first time we see Ellie Sattler. It's oh look, she's wearing the same clothes. Oh look, she's doing the same thing with the glasses. Oh look, Ian Malcolm, he's wearing the same stuff despite being in the Lost World where he suddenly wore different things. He's back wearing what he wears. Oh, Alan Grant's wearing it. Oh, they're saying that. Remember when they said that in that? And it's a bit much. Some of it's nice, but it just pushes it too far to be oh, remember this bit that you all really liked, and when they said this and when they did that cool thing, well, we're going to do it again now. And so basically it's Jurassic Park member berries. Yeah. From South Park, basically. Yeah, but it also doesn't help that Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard, they just don't work for me on screen. And I mean, Bryce Dallas Howard is a phenomenal actor, but to see her in something like this, she just feels out of place, and there's not really chemistry between her and Chris Pratt. And it wasn't, I think, 2 months before the film came out, somebody pointed out on Twitter, can you name their characters? Because obviously we all remember, Alan, Ellie, Ian, Lex, Tim, Hammond, even Gennaro, the lawyer. But I was stumped for a good 10-15 minutes as I tried desperately to access various recesses of my mind to remember what their names are. And it's Vestman. I think it's Owen and Claire. I think he's definitely called Owen, but I mean already a week later I'm is that her name? I think it's Claire. But it's just, they're so forgettable, and they've just blockbuster trope stock character 101 that you could lift them out and stick them into any other film. So they're just faceless. Just out of curiosity, has Chris Pratt ever played anything which isn't quippy, overconfident, joking a lot ass?
He's not as quippy in Passengers, but he is quite rapey in Passengers. So
It's a weird thing to trade up for, I'll be honest. But...
he wakes up, from hypersleep and decides he doesn't want to be alone. So he wakes up the much younger than him attractive female to be his mate and essentially dooms her to death. So it's
lovely.
Yeah.
But other than that, no, it's just he plays the same guy over and over.
I am fascinated by Colin Trevorrow because I just imagine him as this Chauncey Gardiner figure who's become a massive Hollywood filmmaker by a complete accident, and he doesn't realise it, and he's just blundering through it very happily. Like, on the one hand, I think he makes dreadful movies, but on the other hand, he's probably living a better life than any of the rest of us. He's unburdened by any self-awareness.
So, I watched 2 movies. One was Emergency, which was out on Amazon Prime ages ago, but I just got around to it. And the other one's, I think, been on Shudder for a little while too. Mickey Keaton. Never seen any of his movies before, but he's one of these, I don't want to call them indie darlings because none of his movies have been super well received. And he's very young, so he's one of these directors who's not particularly good but very young, so I hate him, obviously. That's the rules, that's how it works. But yes, this is his, folk horror. It takes place in an island which effectively closes for the off-season, which is where the title comes from. So they have like a very fruitful summer or whenever it is spring, and during the colder, darker months, it becomes spooky land for Spooky McSpooky games. And the lead character is invited there because kicking over his tombstone is the most dreadful thing. You get like a letter-headed bit of post saying, your mother's tombstone's being kicked over, come quick. Which, just on that, I don't get it. I'm not wrong, that's a weird thing. And as far as a reason to get people to go to an island, that's weird, isn't it?
I think, I can see it being upsetting, but it's maybe not an emergency.
Yeah, you take your time. And the lead character comes, and her husband struck, lawyer struck, guy who was also in the car struck, person that she hates. Because it's never really established what their relationship is, but they seem to hate each other. Is Joe Swanberg.
Ah, well, there you go.
I was waiting for that, Graham. Thank you.
I try not to disappoint.
And there's also other roles for Richard Brake, who people love, but I don't think I know who he is, honestly.
He's in 31, a lot of Rob Zombie stuff. He's the main guy in 31, and he's done a lot of indie horror.
Yeah. And Jeremy Gardner, who is honestly great. I think After Midnight is one of the... Yeah. It's an absolute delight, that movie. But this, it's like a folk horror that doesn't really understand folk horror. Because the thing about folk horror, I think, is it's about the sort of the fear of the land, something ancient and more unknown that's there. And the way it manifests in this, it's got atmosphere. It's got really good atmosphere. It uses spooky sort of a seaside horror of Messiah of Evil, which is his plotline, basically a remake of. But it doesn't really do anything. I think Messiah of Evil was really, really creepy when it had the sort of the nothing happening, when it was just before something happening. There's like a great scene in a cinema where the characters just sat there watching this weird western, and people just appear behind her, one after the other, and it's super creepy. But in this, there's lots of characters saying, don't do anything or something creepy will happen. Sort of telegraphing it in a very, very basic way, if that makes sense. Yeah. And whenever it happens, there was one scene in a house where a character goes missing and turns up again, and it's supposed to make this big spooky moment, and he honestly laughed.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, Off-Season worked as a video game adaptation of a video game that doesn't exist, because it is very much that the characters that she interacts with are like your characters that you meet in a video game that are like, oh, now you need to go to the shop to find, the keeper to get the key. And there's lots of quiet moments of her like looking through maps and reading notes and that. So I liked it as it's a video game film, even though I haven't seen the video game. But yeah. I also agree with a lot of what you're saying as well, Rob.
Yeah, and there's a bit at the end of The Bridge Keeper as well, which might be the worst scene of the year for me. It's... I don't know who that actor was, but when somebody who shouldn't be acting, but they're trying hard to act.
That makes me want to see it now. I'm like, now I have to see Rob's worst scene of the year.
Yeah. But it didn't do anything for me. And then it sets up this sort of elder god thing at the end. It's like, you did not earn that. Behave, movie. Just behave. And a complete palate cleanser for me was Emergency. So one comedy I hate one genre I hate in comedy is the One Crazy Night thing, because it's always American. It's always these really affluent white kids who have loads of money and loads of opportunities. And I'm a kid in North Yorkshire. And it's like, the house is bigger than like my entire school. I don't relate to this whatsoever. But it's about two black kids and a white and a Mexican guy. The two black actors are Jay Seiler, who was in Me and Earl and the Dying Girl, The Best Thing About That. Yeah. And Donald Watkins. And they find a white girl unconscious in the middle of the floor. And being America, we don't phone the police or whatever because, what police are like in this country. Somebody will get shot. One of them is very street savvy, sort of R.J. Seiler's character, Sean. So he says, no, you don't do that. That's ridiculous. Kunle, who's got parents who are doctors, says, no, just totally phone the police. And it becomes a One Crazy Night thing where they're trying to take her to the hospital. And it's a riff on this sort of subgenre, which is really, really touching. There's two scenes in particular that are heartbreaking. There's one where the police eventually catch up, so you know what's going to happen. It doesn't pull its punches there. And another one after the fact in a lab, which is very, very emotional. It's one of those Amazon Studios movies, and you're never quite sure whether Amazon Studios are supposed to be any good, but sometimes they just sort of slip a good one in.
Yes.
And this is one of them. So, yeah, that's what I've been watching. Have you guys got anything else? Absolutely anything. Graham's talked about a stand-up comedy show before, so really there is nothing that's off the...
Well, I've been preparing for this weekend's Soho Horror Festival. It's doing a Pride edition. So it's going to be, I think it's like up to 10 films with a load of shorts as well that all champion the queer side of horror cinema. It's run again by Mitch Harrod. It's virtual. It's free, although donations are welcome. It runs from the 24th to the 26th, and all of the information can be found on Soho. I think it's like sohohorrorfest.com. And I've started sort of delving into a couple. Watched one called Exploited, which is directed by John Abrams, who was one of the cast of House of Wax and Scary Movie. So he's now moved into directing. And it's very horny slasher film set. It's like this guy finds a thumb drive and it's full of this cam guy model and all of the sexual exploits he has with his clients. But then this guy's gone missing and suddenly he's now getting messages from one of the clients, and there's lots of secrets uncovered. And then the one I've just watched is Hecate, which is a lesbian spin on the rape revenge story, which actually goes more into the feminine mystique. And it's a road movie, and it's all very strange and quiet and subdued, but sort of slowly working my way through. But I highly recommend if you've got some time to kill this weekend, then dip in and check it out, because there's a lot of really good shorts and features. And it's also celebrating Pride. I think there's also going to be some Eurovision competition thing where people have submitted videos. So
I'm going to be featured in it.
There we go. Yeah. There we go. We have one of the competitors.
Yes. I was really hoping you were going to say they've got a Eurovision themed slasher, which now I say it, how has anyone not made that?
I thought there was one, but that might have been a dream I had.
You know how often that happens personally.
Right? Like sometimes I dream things and I was like, did I watch that or did I dream this? People have been asking me like, what are you doing for Pride? Oh, I've lost they're like, what are you going to do for Pride? Are you going to come out for Pride? And I'm like, no, I'm going to stay in and watch So Home Horror. Like, that's my Pride. So yes, I definitely recommend. Second that for checking it out as well.
We are just wrapping up Boy Month on Pop Screen with the episode on Labyrinth should just have come out by the time this goes out. I am pleased to say that after we take a week off at the end of June, we will be coming back in July with a Kate Bush bandwagon special. We've seen the way the trends are going. We're not too big to jump on board.
Kate Bush has been in a movie. I did not know that.
Well, to an extent. Mark and I are doing 2 short films with her in. One of them is The Line Across the Curve, which is a 45-minute mini feature that she directed and starred in. And the other is Les Dogs, an episode of the comic strip Presents, which she was in, because Kate Bush, who can fathom her ways.
Yeah, it's been delightful, that sort of reascendancy with a bunch of kids who love Stranger Things.
Sweet, hasn't it? Yeah. I am. Rob always pulls a face of utter disgust when I say this, and rightly so. But I am a big fan of reaction videos, and one of the great running gags of watching reaction videos is seeing Americans listen to This Woman's Work by Kate Bush for the first time and just go, "Wait, didn't Maxwell do this?"
I'm sure that means something, but that went way over my head, Graham. I'm sorry.
Fair enough.
Any other podcasts people want to?
Well, my recent episode was all about John Carpenter, because it is The Thing's 40th anniversary this year. So myself and my good friend Anto, we chatted about The Thing, and then we also chatted about In the Mouth of Madness. So I'm a bit of a John Carpenter newbie because I like Halloween, but I always felt like I had this weird vendetta against him because for me, Black Christmas is better. So I was always, I don't know, I have weird vendettas for weird reasons against people. So it's only recently that I've been delving into John Carpenter's back catalogue. So I was, I want to say graced, but I also don't, with In the Mouth of Madness, and what a film.
Yes.
Yeah.
What a film.
I've got here's a sort of a dirty secret I'm sort of going to air here. I think Halloween's kind of overrated. It's more important than it is good.
It's not something I'd pick out from his back catalogue as a shining example.
I was expecting it, sort of a visceral sort of reaction there. At least one of you to leave.
No. In terms of podcasts, I've just been on 2 talking about very different things. I've been on 1 talking about True Romance and Natural Born Killers, and I've just recorded 1 talking about Pet Sematary 2, which is better than you might think.
Okay.
Melting weather aside, I think it's time we draw a line into this one. So, Kat, where can we find you and your work on the internet?
I'm on Letterboxd, Instagram and Twitter at Gizmo Shikari, and you can find a link tree there to everything that I'm doing.
Excellent. Graham?
You can find me on Twitter. Oh, did you say Grain or Graham?
Yeah, I couldn't work it out either.
Oh, sorry. So let's go with it anyway. Grain?
Okay. You can find me on Twitter at @what_scream, and on most podcast streaming sites for What a Scream podcast.
Excellent. Graham?
I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Graham W Film. I'm on Letterboxd as Graham Williamson, and of course I write for the Geek Show and do the Geek Show's Pop Screen podcast.
Excellent. And I have been your host, Rob Simpson, and that was Jackie Chan on Directors Uncut.